MIT black jewelry. I know I stand out, I don't need to try for it. I jack the limelight if you don't think ahead quick. I tell them catch me if you can on some gingerbread. Oh, I never ride solo. It's me and my chick looking like slow-mo.
Yo, guys, what's going on? This is Vince down in Tampa, man. I got Lloyd Shellenberger on. He is the host of The Military Historian on iHeart Radio, and it's a great day down here in Tampa. You know, I got the Georgia Southern game. The Georgia Southern alumni are in town. We are going to be rocking it at the Rays game in a little bit, but before I get that, I had to wake Lloyd up in California and do a quick interview and just talk about his new show on iHeart Radio. And Lloyd, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing? And I thought I could have, and I'm looking right now. I could have sworn the 30th was Sunday. I don't know why, but you know what? I purposely did not have anything set aside this weekend because I wanted to make sure that I was available for this interview. So I didn't do any interviews myself this weekend.
Hey, so, absolutely. Hey, so Lloyd, can you give everybody a little background of years of service? So let me know. Lloyd's a combat vet. He has over, 20 plus years of service and a little bit more than that. He's going to go over that with you. He's going to give you his background because I don't want to steal his thunder. But one thing about it is, Lloyd, thank you for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for yours, sir. I spent 43 years in the military. I also have a degree in communications, and and the MIT. I also started the podcast. I'm an author like you are, and I basically I'm a podcaster now primarily, and I try to do things with my podcast to talk about military history and try to break them down in a very simple and concise way because that's the kind of individual I am. Simple and concise. I like to keep it that way.
Oh, great. And so I got a question is your original story. So you used to be behind the camera and now you're behind the mic. So kind of tell me what made you have that transition from being in the military when you were behind the camera, telling the stories and writing the stories to now being behind the mic. But you can definitely elaborate on what your experience was behind the camera.
Well, as you well know, I was a public affairs officer for the 79th and I worked with you. And what happened was during my period of time, I got mobilized several times to Iraq to work as a public affairs officer and a psychological operations officer. So I kind of got an inside view in the way, I suppose, studios and major networks work and what they're looking for. And it wasn't a very complimentary view. So when I came back, I decided that I was eventually going to get into podcasting and stuff. And I moved to LA originally to be an actor and a musician and singer. And none of those worked out, thankfully. And I just decided that maybe I'm going to be an author. And with my journalist background, it wasn't a big stretch to do this.
Okay. All right. So let me have you prepare mentally and emotionally for your shows. And, and with you being a journalism background, how much time do you do in research?
Oh, I do a lot of research. For example, I prepare mentally because I sit down and I know what I'm looking at, where I'm going on each show. Because as an author, we have a beginning, middle, and end, and a summary. And I make sure that my shows cover all that. And when I do my research, for example, I'm going to be doing a show eventually on Benghazi. There's going to be extensive research for that. The Straits of Hormuz, Straits of Malacca. I'm going to be doing extensive research on those because each of those requires 100% accurate facts. And as well as I do, being a military historian, I don't get to be off. I don't get that. I have to be 100% on at all times. And I make sure that I'm on when I sit down and I have the facts. And sometimes you'll see me with a piece of paper in my hand to make sure that I quote exact facts from reputable sources.
All right. So their audience connection. So that's great, Lloyd, segue into, you have to be a great listener to be a journalist, but also a podcast host. So How do you kind of make that when you're having that interaction with people? What kind of things do you do to make sure that you get that vibe? Because you got to have that connection when you're talking to people, and you're very personable. So how do you work that dynamic?
Well, when I ask a question, and I remember I told you Condoleezza Rice kind of taught me this a little bit by watching her. When I ask a question, I'm looking for the second question already in what you respond. And that response determines what my second question will be.
A lot of people don't really understand public affairs and commentary journalism and Walter Cronkite journalism or traditional journalism. So if you could really in a short frame kind of break it down, how public affairs, what's their major role as a journalistic entity, and then how it's very different from the commentary journalism we have today.
Okay, well, public affairs, first of all, you have to break down public affairs. Military public affairs is different from what companies and other people use, because we have 3 shadow audiences in military public affairs. And our job is to tell the story and put out the key message, just like in civilian world, but it is not investigative journalism. That is not what we do. We put out the message, put out the key message, and then monitor it and analyze it. In the civilian world, they're putting out a message to sell a product. They're basically trying to sell their company. They're trying to sell their story, but they're also not really restricted as much as we are with the truth. It is the absolute backstop that does not get to move. And
so, compared to traditional journalism and public affairs, what is the difference now that you see between, you have commentary journalism, which you just touched on, and then you have traditional journalism, like you grew up on Walter Cronkite, Barbara Walters, and all those guys. Because you guys because you actually have like AFN, you have all these different news networks that work for the military. So what is the kind of difference between CBS and AFN?
Okay, I'll give you a great example. Once again, AFN is not investigative journalism. That is not what they do. CBS is. Okay. Then let's talk about the differences. When you're talking legacy media is what they're now being referred to as, they, to a certain extent, what's the best way of putting it? They are tied to certain ideologies
of certain interest groups.
Yeah, and they're not going to leave those ideologies, and even at the cost of the accuracy of the story or the proprietary correctness of that story. They're not going to leave that ideology behind. AFN doesn't get to have an ideology, and that is huge. And I wish we could go back to those days of Edward R. Murrow or Walter Cronkite, who basically said, essentially, news is what I say it is. But the one thing was with him is he had integrity in as much as he stuck to the truth. He understood that his role was to inform the public,
right,
not to give them opinions. And that's where we're at right now. And I it's changing a little bit, and the reason it's changing a little bit is because people are leaving legacy media to listen to shows like this and get their straight skinny from shows like this versus legacy media.
So why do you think in our society we've got that? So what impact do you think social media has had on the way people view content and information? Because, before we had the legacy media, as you said, and then Fox came around later, CNN came around later, and then we got on a 24-hour cycle of information. So do you think now with social media and all these news on a regular basis, like it's a dopamine, do you think sometimes it gets oversaturated?
Oh, absolutely. And it gets down to the old principle that if you tell, unfortunately, and if you tell a lie enough times, it becomes the truth. And that's exactly where a lot of these legacy media outlets are versus social media that has now turned podcasters like you and I into reputable news sources.
Right.
We weren't that 20 years ago. Just like a TV show on the internet was not considered a TV show.
Right.
But Disney, and all these other large corporations changed that.
That's right. Started streaming, and here we are. So it's great because now you're talking about the evolution of media. So the shift from radio to podcast to streaming. So my take to you is, what's your perception now that we still have talk radio? So I was on 102.5 The Bone the other night and spoken. And honestly, I actually asked the question when I walked in there to the Dom show, is that, are people still on legacy radio talk shows? And I did not believe it until I did the show the other night, and there was a ton of people on there. But then here you are on iHeart Radio. So talk radio, it seems like it's growing to the point where it's not opinionated. It's it's like, here are the facts, like Paul Harvey, and if you don't like the facts, I can't help you, but this is what it is. So
well, absolutely. And here's the thing that's really important about that. We're getting back to journalists being held and as you and I being held accountable for what we say on the radio. We're being held accountable for it now. And that's by the number of views and the clicks. So we're back to the market will decide, and the market decides upon how well you present your facts, how good they are, and the way you do it. And we're back to that. And yes, there's still legacy media out there that have hung on, but I don't know quite why they're still doing the things they're doing. Like, I hate to say it, CNN. Their viewership is on a level that it went below the floor level, and yet they persist in doing the things they do. MSNBC was dumped because, and I know this because we actually work for a parent company that owns that, and I'm not going to say the name, but they actually decided that maybe it's time to shift the aircraft carrier, jettison non-profitable agencies.
Oh, I understand. And so you talk about hell and pressure now. So so great.
I'm trying to skip around that.
Yeah, we got to, man. We got to. I only got so much insurance.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, so when you talk about so let's talk about and you brought it up. Having the pivot. What happens when you're doing an interview and you've done tons of them, and you have an unexpected conversation that has an unexpected turn that you were not prepared for? How did you kind of handle that situation? Is that you went in with one conversation in your notes, and by accident the conversation pivoted on you and you were like ill prepared? How did you handle those situations?
Well, I've had those, and the funny part is that it's like life. I mean, it gets awkward for a moment, and maybe you shouldn't have gone there. Maybe you did. Maybe the other person just was having one of those days. You just move on. There's nothing you can do about that. As much as and there are people that do these interviews like you and I, and they will persist down that rabbit hole that you probably shouldn't go. And your guests. I don't do these hardball interviews. Never have.
Right.
Because if I'm having somebody on as a guest, they're giving me their time, and thankfully I should treat them with that kind of respect.
Oh yeah. Well, I just had one, and so and she told me she wants it published and it's going to be uncensored and unapologetic. So I got to do some stuff up front when I'm going to present it to let everybody know her opinion matters. But let me tell you, man, it was fire. It was hell and brimstone and fire, man. But but the thing about it was the authentic. She was authentic. It was raw, but she made some valid points. And it's funny. We'll just say this: it had a lot of implications about things that happened in Hollywood. so we're just we're gonna clean it up and go with the show. So let's talk about, and this is where it comes down to voices, right? So do you think veterans, and because you're a veteran and, again, thank you for your service. Do you think veteran stories matter in today's media landscape? Because I think they get kind of, and I hate to use the term whitewash that we've used before back in the day. Like it's vague and it's only comes around for holidays. But do you think the veterans stories need to be more prevalent throughout the year, except on Veterans Day or Memorial Day? You know what I mean? Or 4th of July.
Absolutely. Let me tell you a story. While I spent most of my career in public affairs, the past quite a few years of my military career, and there were times I would do a story and then I would take it over to a major network, major. Let's call it a major. That way, that's what everybody knows them as. And I would take it over there. And there's usually two reasons they would either accept or not accept the story. One was it wasn't part of their angle, that they had no desire to cover. And usually if it bleeds, it bleeds. That's true.
That's true.
And a fire is also always going to get on. That's why stringers make a lot of money. Or the second reason, the quality of it. A lot of times I saw military journalists not taking quality pieces over to networks and wonder why the networks wouldn't touch them.
Right.
And if you're going to take a piece over to a major, keep in mind, they do it better than anybody. You better have the quality that goes along with it. So those two reasons kept a lot of stuff off the air, coupled with the fact that it's not a sexy story sometimes when you're talking about a soldier who did something that maybe was, it wasn't necessarily the most exciting lead that you've ever seen.
Right.
So, and by the way, thank you. I noticed you got my Aspire to Inspire Leadership 101, your show.
Hey, look, I told you, man, I gotta promote you, man. You are a beacon of change, and and the thing is, you just keep helping me out with my segues. So I'm gonna keep rolling with it. So what inspired you to serve in the military? And what was the decision that drove you to do it, to what you do today? So what really made you want to join the military first?
Well, I think we covered the story of I quit school at 16 because every 16-year-old knows everything about life.
Right.
And I at 16 said, don't need school. I'm already smart. I already know exactly what I want to do, where I'm at. And my dad was getting up at 4 a.m, going to work at John Deere's and working hard. Didn't like the idea that his son was going to sit on the couch all day and watch TV. So he brought a recruiter home and said, as I said in the previous show, he'll sign whatever you put in front of him.
But he won't be on my sofa.
And at 17, I was gone. Back then, you could do that. Now, now I was 18 and 18 a high school degree.
Yeah, but I got to ask you, okay, so, you made that decision many years ago. How did that shape you today, Lloyd? Really, how does it shape you now?
My God, that's been everything. Without the military, I would not have a basis for the knowledge and haven't seen the world. And I've seen things, General, that most normal people will never get to see. I've met and I've interviewed congressmen, senators, helped interview secretaries of state, Clinton, Condoleezza Rice, presidents.
Wow.
I'll never get that opportunity in real life. And then I've seen the entire world in one way or another. So I have stories to tell. I speak from a point of actually having been there. There's a big difference between pontificating and actually talking about what you've seen.
Yes. And that's what I love when people come to me talking about certain things like the Strait of Hormuz or this or that. And I've worked on those operations. I'm like, bro, where'd you get your information from? You're just like, you're all over the place. So if you had to tell your younger self today, so if you got a chance to meet Lloyd, 17-year-old Lloyd today, what would you tell him? What advice would you give him?
I would tell him to not be so defiant. I was a rebel. If you told me to go left, I would go right on purpose. And I could never figure out why I would get myself in trouble. Look, you're starting out, you're young, and even as you get older, you don't run everything. Everybody works for somebody, and you need to accept and be humble and understand. At no point are you 100% master of your own life. There are other things that have a say-so in it, and you have to give them that say-so. God has a say-so always. If you ever think that the man upstairs has got no say-so in your life, he can remind you in a millionth of a second that he has every say-so in your life.
That's right. Somebody gets a vote, right? There's always
a vote. He
right.
gets a vote, man. And that vote, you better pay attention to that vote, because the man upstairs, he isn't playing.
No. And, you did a thing. You were in the reserves, and then, you did a little AGR, you did tours. So what was the hardest thing in the last 5 years that, or last 2.5 years that you've transitioned from the military, going every day, to being a civilian and setting up your podcast, setting up different jobs that you're doing in LA out there? So what was the biggest transition piece that impacted you when you made that transition to the civilian world?
That's a great question. Well, the biggest piece is when you're in the military. Now, I still produced. When you're in the military, a lot of times people's expectations of you are a lot different from when you go in the civilian world. When you go in the civilian world, particularly when you're working for a major studio or whatever you're doing, their expectations are through the roof, and you got to meet them, because if you don't meet them, they'll just escort you out the door. You have to learn to adjust your output. Your output changes going from a government job, or a government employee type of situation, to a civilian one.
Right.
It's a whole different level of expectations and a whole different level of performance you better provide.
And I always tell people that, to me, the difference between the military and the civilian world is the military is metric and performance based, and I think the civilian world is so metric data driven compared to the military, because if you're in good shape, you get points for that. So I think that the broader scope of the military allows a person, even if they have setbacks, that they can overcome. In the civilian world, you don't really have those opportunities. If you have a few setbacks, you'd be looking for another job.
You're gone.
So what leadership principles from the military still anchor you today?
Oh, well, the ones that we talked about, number one, essentially training people to do your job. Huge. If you're a supervisor in the civilian world, good supervisors, and this is what I got from the military. There are two types of leaders that I see in the world. First one leads by intimidation. They'll tell you that they're the only competent ones in the room, and as long as you agree with everything they say, you'll be fine, and that you basically are not that important.
Right.
Second leader, the one that the military promotes, is the one that says, I'm going to promote my success by promoting your success. I'm going to make sure that you succeed. I'm going to make sure that you're taken care of, and that you can do the same thing I can do. If you can do that, we both are successes. That's the second one. And trying to take that sometimes into the civilian world, sometimes that doesn't fly, because civilians are very proprietary in their positions and their titles and where they're at in their companies, and they're not jumping up and down over that philosophy sometimes.
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of it is knowledge. In the civilian world, they beam it. Knowledge is power, and in the military, if one person goes down, the mission doesn't stop. Somebody still has to step up and do it. So I think the difference is they're on survival of the fittest. We're on survival of the team, and I think that's just a big difference in the two concepts of the military. So, what is the biggest misconception? Since you've been out, since you've been talking to civilians, and I love this question, what's the biggest misconceptions that civilians have about veterans?
Well, I don't think they really truly look at us as this bastion of knowledge. That's the funny part. Even though we've been all over the world, we've done exactly what they wanted to do themselves. We did it. They don't necessarily look at us as a bastion of knowledge. And particularly when you're going into Hollywood in these major studios, you're not going to get that respect. You just know it up front. live with it, and learn. Okay, and work around it. Work from the old adage of managing from the middle. You are going to manage from the middle. Learn to live with it.
And it is the way it is, because I think some people cannot conceptualize, like, you've been to Iraq, you've been to Afghanistan, or you've been on multiple tours around the world, you've been to Poland. Most people cannot wrap their arms or conceive that kind of lifestyle, which is what I realized. And that experience you gain of being an ambassador for the United States in a foreign country, being the State Department head person. Even though you're in uniform, you're representing the United States and to some degree, even though you're not a State Department person. And I always tell people this. AFN had a great commercial back in the 70s, and it said, any country a soldier goes into, dress properly, know the customs, because you're an ambassador to the United States. And I think we've gotten away from that, and we kind of need to fix that overall. But, you do a lot of volunteer work, and you help a lot of groups. So kind of tell me, what's your purpose after serving so long in the military in the uniform, and now you've taken it off? What kind of stuff are you doing around Hollywood right now? What kind of groups are you supporting for veterans?
Well, I am part of the Veterans in Film, and that is something I've been doing for years. And if I actually produce a film or produce a project, I try to hire veterans first, always. And that is my first priority, and they do a great job. On the barracks, we had a whole veteran crew.
Wow!
And I prefer that. So that's the way I support. I try to bring people into that are veterans. Second thing is that I always do support veterans groups. I give as much money as I can to them when I have the opportunity. I also tend to believe that veterans seem to have a better handle, in my opinion, on what's going on and understand the bigger picture better than most people. And that's why, for the most part, if I can bring them in as consultants and things, I tend to do that.
Oh, awesome. So, hey, as we wrap it up here, Lloyd, kind of give a little pitch about your new show on iHeartRadio, man. And I know I got one in one of the episodes, but overall, when does it air? And what kind of guests are you looking for to be on your show, and what impact do you intend to have with your show?
All right, my new show is called The Military Historian, and I talk about the history of being in war zones, what people actually experienced while they were in the war zones, and I also talk about military history. The kind of guests I love having on my show are people like you, who have an insight on leadership, who, because as you can see, that big smile of yours, I used to look forward to seeing that. And that does more than you realize for people.
I appreciate that.
And then the other thing is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a show that people can listen to. And there's not always going to be pretty flowers and everything we're going to talk about. One of my shows is The Mass Graves of Iraq. As you may or may not know, I covered that. And, I'm not going to smile and joke and have a great time while I'm doing that show, because millions of people lost their lives. There's nothing joyful about that.
Right.
But for the most part, leadership shows like this aspire to inspire. When I was looking for a title for this show, I went around a million titles until I went and looked at that, and I said, oh, my goodness. Why am I looking any further?
I know.
So I said, it's got to be the title for the show has to be Aspire to Inspire, because that's exactly what a good leader does. And this is part of the leadership series. So I'm looking for more generals. If you know somebody that are willing to come onto my show, I am absolutely 100% wanting to put them on my show. And you have my number. I'll put them on, because I want their secrets. Because yours was motivational speaking and positive interaction. The previous general to this, he had taken the 200th MP, General turned it from 220 to 220th, I believe it was, or
220, yeah.
220th. He had turned it from a little bit of a decentralized command into a centralized command that could answer the call when mobilization came. And it was a very efficient organization under his leadership. And that was what his show encompassed. I'm looking for generals that and other leaders that can tell me how they, from a leadership perspective, improved the environment they were in.
Oh, absolutely. I get you a list of a couple colonels and generals, and honestly, General Chern. When I ever air this, I got him in my phone. I love that guy to death. Major General Chern is a phenomenal American, and he always put people first. That I honestly have to say that he put people first. And the same thing with you, Lloyd. You've always put the people around you first. The civilians that you've ran into, you've had a heart. People don't realize this, and I'll say this right now before we get off here. He has a heart bigger than gold when he's in the box. It's not just U.S. centric. He is trying to leave a pathway so when he leaves the country, that people know that the Americans that were in that area or in that zone, they actually cared why they were there and tried to leave it in a better position than when they found it. So, Lloyd, with that being said, man, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service, too, as well.
And
thank
I
you for your time.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming on. Keep it rolling. And hey, guys, and if you're out there and check out Gray's clothing line, they have it for teachers, first responders, and military. And it's a great group of clothing. When they're on sale, they're a little pricey up front, but if you catch them on sale, it's a great thing. But they have a discounted code. I got it right here. And also, if you got time, check out my new book, Keep It Rolling. It just came out. It's doing pretty good on Amazon. Well, it's on all platforms. Get you a copy, and if you get in contact with me, I will send it to me. I'll sign it and send it back to you. I'll pay the return postage on it. And with that being said, guys, welcome to Keep It Rolling with my boy Lloyd Shellenberger. Check out his show. Definitely the military historian on iHeart Radio, and it's on YouTube. And I got the link. The link will be below when this show airs. And with that being said, keep it rolling, Lloyd. Thank you again.
Peace out.